So a couple of weeks ago, I got a question on my Patreon site, and I think the question came from Corey Charles, but if that's not who asked the question, I apologize. I can't remember who asked it. But he was asking about how to deal with a stave that might be too thin to build a stiff risered bow. So to build a stiff riser, a thick handle like this, obviously you need a lot of wood to work with. And sometimes, and this is actually something that comes up pretty often, sometimes you just don't have that much wood on the belly side of a stave, but it's an easy fix and we're gonna jump right into it. What we're gonna be doing here is laminating another piece onto the belly side of this bow so that we have enough material to work with. Now, one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this bow in particular is because we are doing a giveaway, not the bow, but we're gonna give away a t-shirt. And we're doing this over on Instagram. So what I did was I built this bow, I had it shooting, and I put it on the scale. This thing was drawing 52 pounds at 28 inches. Now, what we're gonna do over on Instagram is I asked people to post what they think this bow will weigh after this sinew cures. So I sinew backed it. I put 1.5 ounces of sinew on each limb. This is back sinew. And I tied it into a little bit of a reflex, which you see if you look straight down this stave. And then also as this sinew dries, it's gonna pull this bow into even more of a reflex. And so what I'm asking people to do is get on Instagram, post what you think the new weight is going to be after this sinew cures, and that's gonna be a couple of weeks from now. So go over there, post what you think it's gonna be, tag a buddy that's interested in bow building, and you'll be entered to win a t-shirt. So moving on. All right, so the stave that we're gonna be working on is not a big piece of wood. It's already fairly thin, and to get this thing to 1 growth ring, I'm even gonna have to come down here, I'm gonna guess 1/4 inch or better. And so once I do that, we're gonna be left with a fairly thin stave. Now you could do a bendy handle bow, and even you could probably still do a stiff riser section on this piece of wood. You're still gonna have enough, but I don't have enough wood here to do the kind of handle that I really like to make, which is more of a pistol grip type of a handle. And so I'm gonna go ahead and get this down to 1 ring, and then we're gonna pick it up, and I'm gonna show you how to fix that. Super thick rings on this thing. So the stave that I'm working on here has just been abused. That's the only way to describe it. This thing rolled around in the back of a truck for I don't know how long, and it's been exposed to all kinds of weather. Soaking rains, hot baking sun, wind, driving around, and all of that stuff. That wet dry cycle, and that in combination with the wind has caused this thing to open up some pretty significant cracks in the backing ring of this stave. And the stave is thin enough that I'm not gonna be able to get below those cracks. If I tried to get below them, I just wouldn't have very much material left to work with. And so I'm just gonna leave them there. In general, and I get this question quite often, about longitudinal cracks in a bow stave or in a finished bow. In general, they're not gonna cause any trouble at all unless they run off the side. And that's one of the reasons that I always lay my bow out with the grain and then heat and bend everything into alignment, is so that I don't have any of that grain that runs off the side of the limb. Now, for this stave, I've got a couple of places where there's some pretty serious cracks right on the edge. And so what I'm gonna do is just take my compass and I'm gonna scribe a line on here, and on the bottom limb, so here I've got a crack right here on the edge, so I'm gonna come this way to get rid of that crack. So I'm gonna scribe my line on this side of the stave, and then I'm gonna take this side down, I'm gonna get below that crack, and here I've got a crack on this side, so I'm gonna scribe my line more on that side so that I can draw knife this off and get rid of this stuff. Then I'll just be left with these cracks that are running right down the center of the stave, and those aren't going to cause a problem because they go with the grain, they don't run off the sides. All right, so I've got this line scribed on this side of the stave down here, but on this side, I'm gonna have to scribe it over here to get rid of this crack right here. And so I'm just gonna switch my compass around and scribe my line on this side. But right in here, I'm gonna have to make this transition. We're gonna be taking wood off this side of the stave down here, but this side of the stave up here. And so we have to make that switch. And I'm gonna do it right in the handle section because this is gonna be a stiff risered bow. And a little bit of grain, you know, if you cut across the grain here, it doesn't really matter because it's not bending at all. And so what I've done is just take my pencil and just come eyeball as best you can. All right, so I've got this stave down to 1 ring, and then I went ahead and took my compass and just scribed a parallel line. I've got the sides cut down to about where they're gonna be. And I went ahead and just laid out where my handle's gonna be. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna flatten this handle or riser section out. We're just gonna glue another piece to it. But in order to flatten it out, we've gotta get rid of some of this belly wood on the limbs because we need this sticking up above the wood that's gonna be right here so that we can lay this thing on our belt sander and flatten everything down. So I'm gonna go ahead and just take my draw knife and just go down a little bit on the limbs here just so that the handle is a little bit higher. So here's my handle section, and my fades are gonna come out into here somewhere. So I'm just gonna stay kind of outside of the area where the fades are gonna be. So before I started flattening this handle down, my mic, the battery in my mic went dead, and so I didn't have any audio. So I'm just gonna walk you through what I did. So basically, we took the draw knife and removed some of the belly wood on this stave and got the belly wood down below the handle so that handle was sticking up far enough so that when we stuck it on that belt sander, we weren't sanding the limbs as well. We just wanted to flatten that riser section down. You could take 50 grit sandpaper, glue it to a board, and then just take this block and rub it on that board back and forth. And the same with the bow, just back and forth, making sure that you keep everything flat. You could flatten everything out like that if you didn't have a belt sander. It's just gonna take you a little longer. But the most important thing to get a nice clean glue line is having both of these surfaces very flat and mating up perfectly. Now if you look at this, you'll notice that this stave is a little thicker on this side than this side. That's perfectly fine. If this doesn't have to be flat this way, just as long as you have a nice flat surface. As long as these two surfaces made up and they're flat, it doesn't have to be level. I'll take advantage of any wood that's good on this stave. If I have a thicker side and a thinner side, that's completely fine. That's all gonna go away when we shape this thing up. So now we're to the point that we can just work this like any other stave. We're gonna go ahead and take these sides down to match the width of this. We're gonna cut our fades in here and make it look good. So now I'm just gonna lay out my handle and my fades. When I set my compass about how deep I want the deepest part of my handle. Scribe a line on there. And then I have on my back, I've got the top and the bottom. So I'm just gonna take those lines, transfer them right there. And then for the fades, I'll set an approximate limb thickness. Come right here. And this is all stuff that I cover in depth on the Patreon site if you're interested in signing up for that. There's a lot of cool stuff over there. All right, so now the way I do my fades is I just come from this point and connect it to this point along some radius. And it doesn't matter, I'm just using an old chop saw blade. Literally, it doesn't matter what, if I can get this thing set up right. You know, just something that gives you a nice arc along for this fade right here. Maybe a 7 or 8 inch diameter circle, something like that. Same way over here. And do the same thing on the other side. All right, so I'm gonna show you how I cut out my fades. Now, I've never seen anyone else do it this way, but it's a very easy way, but it does take a little bit of practice to get things right. So I'm gonna use a chisel, and this is, I don't know, 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches wide. It's a sharp chisel, and I'm just gonna use this to follow the line that I've scribed on this riser. It's very, very important to have the chisel facing the right way. A chisel, just like a draw knife, is made to be used one way versus the other. I know that people are going to give me some crap about using a draw knife that way with the bevel down, but that's the way that it's intended to be used. Now, a chisel is used the same way. It's got a flat side and a beveled side. And the bevel, the reason it has that bevel is so that you can use that bevel to basically pivot off of and guide that chisel around a curve. Now, if we were to go flat side down, this thing wouldn't want to do anything but dig into the wood, and you wouldn't be able to guide it anywhere. So if we go flat side down, as we lower the back side of this, we'll be able to follow that curve exactly. Now, I'm not going to go flat here and just try to chisel this whole thing out at once. I'm gonna tilt my chisel like this a little bit. I'm gonna do one side, and then I'm gonna come and I'm gonna do the other side, and that's gonna leave a ridge running right down the center. And you don't have to do it all at once. I got a big chunk here. I'm just gonna take off a bit first and then go back and do it a little bit finer. See how it followed that line perfectly. I'm going to come to this side and do the same thing. So here's the other side. Just want to start by taking the big, take a big hunk of it off. Magic. So we'll end up finishing this bow in another video. The main point of this video is just to show you how to beef up that handle, but we're going to finish this thing in another one, and I'll go ahead and deal with these cracks in a different video. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and take some tight bond and just work it down in here. Just get as much down in there as I can. But like I said, I'm gonna finish this on another video, so subscribe to the channel if you want to catch that. All right, so now we've got this thing pretty much shaped up, the fades are cut out, and we've built this stave up enough so we have plenty of meat to make whatever shape handle we want to make. And so, you know, now you just continue on just like you've made this thing from a big hunk of wood. The glue, the tight bond that we used in this is very, very strong. I've never had one of these things pop off. And if you're building board bows, this is actually a good way to do it. You know, if you want to make a board bow with a stiff riser section, just use this same method. You know, just take you another piece, laminate it right on the belly, and go from there. But with that, if you're interested in bow building specifically, I would highly encourage you to go and check out my Patreon site. I've got a ton of exclusive videos there that you're not going to find on YouTube. Hours and hours and hours of exclusive bow building videos. So go check that out, and we'll see you next week.